more people will come. We'll introduce slowly our main speaker. The theme of our conference today, Immigration, un problème, immigration a problem when faith comes to the aid of politics. So we have here in our offices of the Universal Peace Federation, which is a non-profit organization, an organization recognized at the United Nations. We seek to establish a world of peace centered on interdependence, mutual prosperity, and universally shared values. We are based on those 5 principles, basic principles that humanity is one family under God, that the human being is first and foremost of a spiritual and moral nature, that the family is a first school of love and peace, that peace will be established when we will come to live one for the other, and that we can establish peace in the world, we have to transcend all national, religious, and other barriers. Today, we invited Mr. Martin Bellerose to speak to us about this theme. We will start and people will join with us. Mr. Bellerose is he's a professor, full professor and director of the Institute for Theological Studies and Research in Interculturality, Migration and Mission. He is also professor and director of the Protestant Theological Institute of the United Church of Canada. We will now give the floor to Mr. Bellerose. Thank you.
Bonjour.
Hello, everyone.
Donc, ce matin,
so this morning,
je vais tout de suite offrir une réponse.
I will start by offering an answer. Is immigration a problem? No. When faith comes and comes to the help of the politics, that's where it becomes interesting. I think that there's a certain, it's a bit risky what I say, there's a certain superiority to the religious commitment compared to the political engagement. The religious commitment is more compromising than the political commitment. A little historical example is Constantine in the 4th century became Christian on his deathbed for a very simple reason. He never was officially converted to Christianity before his death because he knew that as a head of state, as a Roman emperor, that he could not satisfy the principles of life, the Christian principles of life. He knew that he would have to kill in order to follow. So this was very difficult. So a few minutes before his death, it was a bit more easy to respect the principles of Christian faith, but it's true for the vast majority of religions. We talk about this illustration. First, going from faith to belief. I talk about a work that has already been done on a book I wrote on the exit of religion. In the universal history, we have the emergence since the beginning of faith, of their beliefs. It's intrinsic to human beings. It's first and foremost beliefs that are based on a founding past. First, which means that things have been created by divinities, God or ancestors or God, or whichever way we identified. Thank you very much. And we thank you for that. Everything is written into nature. We have a founding past, and that's it. The only way to come into relation with God are actions of grace or things that do not negate this founding realities. So then religious groups will appear. One religious group in particular who says that no, our God is a God of the gods, is the God above all gods, without negating the existence of other gods, but it doesn't identify to one of the little gods that exists, but more to the supreme God. Which means for us, that's not what happens with us. You come out and you don't know what he wants for us. So how to explain that things cannot be as they should have been if their God is almighty and all good and almighty. So we say God is good. He wants a goodness for his population. But he's all powerful, or he's all powerful, and why does his people suffer? But it's neither one or the other. God is at the same time good and all powerful. But if we suffer and we don't have what God promised us, it's because we didn't follow his will. That's what we call sin. That's the sin against God, is to disobey to the law of God. That's where that appears faith as we understand it, which means the faith that another world should exist, that something else should exist. The believer in the register of truth is an eternal and unsatisfied person. We cannot be satisfied of the world as it is. Otherwise, why should we desire something else, such as the kingdom of God? And it's true for all religions of eschatological character based on an ultimate end. That's the whole space covered by faith, that we have sufficient manifestations of God to say that he is with us. God has already been manifested through his prophets, and I talk in a generic way, through his messengers, but his will was not realized in all its fullness. That's the breadth of faith. There's a space between what is not yet realized and what is now. That's where we find the space for creativity. That's where we have space to imagine, and everything is in plurality. We don't have a formula as in the founding past where people say, thank you, my God, for everything that's there. It's not like this anymore. It's not how we think anymore. We have a creative responsibility. So at this time, the plurality becomes a positive element in the construction of this other future, which has always been present with us. So there is a shifting from faith to belief. So it's in the register of faith that we find ourselves. When we speak of other religious, which comes, that faith comes to the help, to the aid of politics. So we're not talking about a religious institution. We're not going back to medieval concepts of theocracy, where the Catholic Church, for example, or some churches say, when we will have power, it will be the city of God that will be established. We're not at all saying that. But there is a shift of the role of religions in public life. It brings me to the second part, a privatized faith, once it's a private sphere which was made public, a privatized faith, and a private sphere made public. So we had first a movement of privatization of faith throughout history. I situate myself in a register of Abrahamic religions, not because it's not true for other religions, but because it is the field in which I'm working and I'm situated myself as a Christian. Is true, especially for the Jewish Muslim and Christian faith.
Dans les dernières années,
In the last few years in the West, the Western Europe and in America, the whole of America, we assisted to what we could call the crumbling of private life institutions. We have, until recently, institutions in our life which served at the same time as a wall and a connector with our private life and the public life. Three institutions that is very precious to unification is for the first two ones: marriage, family, and parish, or the ecclesial community. That's where we could live some things in private. The marriage was protecting the privacy of what was experienced within itself. At the same time, marriage has served as a connector between rural communities, which we had in Quebec, where people could very difficultly have contact with people living in other I don't know what to call this. Everything was divided by rang. It's like a very long kind of stretch of land. What the husband had the most of was working, and he was connecting his family and his wife and his family to the rest of society, and the wife stayed at home. And this was happening at the exit of coming out of church. We could say that we used to say that what happened in the bedroom stays in the bedroom, and it's not true anymore. Everything is falling apart. Now, also in the family, we were saying that children, when they would arrive on the workplace, it was the father that brought them into work. The elder brothers who found a job for the younger brothers. It was always a connector. At the same time, it was always a way to preserve a certain privacy when there was privacy, when there was handicapped, people mentally handicapped were protected by the family and protected from the outside world that could discriminate against them. When we had an homosexual in the family, it was the same thing. We would preserve, nobody would talk about it. The secret was kept. And we always found a way to connect him after this. And the parish played the same role as well. It was the place where we could confess our worst sins and have a certain secret preserved. At the same time, the parish is the place of social meetings, before taverns, before public places of meeting, markets. It was in the parish that people could connect and meet. So with the disappearance or the crumbling of those institutions, the second half of the 20th century, individuals were proposed more directly on the public sphere. The famous slogan which said, what happens in the bedroom stays in the bedroom. It was sadly not true anymore. We have just to see internet now to see that everything is exposed. We proclaim our homosexuality to the whole world through social networks, through institution of public life as well. But the parish doesn't have a role anymore because the faith which we expressed is transversal now. It is projected outside of this parish. We tried to the pandemic. It was extraordinary to see that we say that the fundamental essence of a religious faith is the community. We see that it wasn't that anymore. We could connect ourselves on a cult. I'm talking about I'm sorry, a Sunday service happening in a different country. Cult means culte in French means Sunday service. So we could join a Sunday service happening in another country. We could be taken out of our private sphere. Parallel to this, we had during the 20th century, we would say here towards most of the 20th century, the abandonment by the state of fields which it was legislating for, which were simply brought into the public spheres. There's two fields, two global fields, the field of morality and of ultimate ends of life, about the end of life. It corresponds to the law of separation of 1905 in France, which had an impact on the whole Western world. This law said that the church was separated from the state. With the church separating from the state, all the private interest groups were separated from the state. At the same time, it gave the right to the individuals, which they had lost with the French Revolution, the right, fundamental right, an individual fundamental right, which is the right to meet and to meet as individuals to defend common interests. It's a great contradiction of the French Revolution. We promoted the individual as the king, defend to the end individual rights. We abolished political parties, abolished religious groups, abolished the possibility to meet together in groups. But the most fundamental right, human right, is the right to regroup, meet together as a group. It's a contradiction. The law of separation, 1905 in France, legislated on this and separated the two spheres, which is of the public sphere and the private sphere. So the state only legislates which is connected to the state. And regarding private rights, take care of this in the groups that you can form. So it remains that we put an equal footing. The churches, the Catholic Church, for example, all religions. To take an example, the Catholic Church became now exactly the same thing as the group of defense of rights with the young punks with red hair that want to swim in the St. Lawrence River in February. For the state, is the same thing. All these little interest groups or the big religious groups is the same thing in front of the law. There's a fundamental difference that the religious group do not come from individual rights, but from collective rights. That doesn't concern only unification. Doesn't only want to save people of unification movement of the whole of humanity, which you want to transform. Same for Christians, same for Muslims. And it's the same for most of the great religious trends of thought. Although the law defends private interests. This brought the groups of action groups carrying a religious faith to come back during the 20th century to defend their private interests, but not through the state, because the state doesn't defend it, but through their own organizations. And that's the great, most important thing that happened in the 20th century. What was privatized is now becoming public again. It's not the religious that becomes public. It's not the religious that becomes public, because the religious did not take the same shape in the public sphere as it had in the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, if a religious faith was represented by the state, it's because the state was following this faith. The Christian kings in France, the Muslim sultans, so they adhere to this faith, and the people under their sphere of influence adhere to this faith. And there's a power attached to religion. What happens is completely different. As the state does not take a position and is less and less taking a position in the world on questions, for example, of homosexuality, of transgenderism, of marriage, on the questions even of the social justice, it's not not their cup of tea. Groups of defense of rights will feel the need to manifest even by being elected, but not necessarily to be manifested in the public sphere to defend their rights. We have groups that will oppose themselves publicly on abortion, will intervene in public debate in the newspapers. Some group will be in favor in abortion and will, in the name of their faith, and will intervene in the public sphere. They're not, they don't have power in the state, but they make pressure on the state. The same thing for things of social, moral social, social mores. It's often religious organizations that will offer charity for poor people. On the questions of end of life, which seems a little more abstract. It's not at all abstract because the states, before democracies, had a final goal that the state will become the kingdom of heaven. That's what the states exist to do. That's what Charlemagne said. I will make sure that the Pope follows the commandment of God. He even placed himself above the religious authorities in this case. But we had an ideal which was promoted by the state itself. Some states were create a concordat with the Vatican and with the state to defend religious principles. It brings them to encourage certain moral ideas which corresponded to the ideal of based on the religion. This has disappeared, and now the state just legislates and manages the daily things. It doesn't mean we have social ideals of unification, of interculturality as goals of marriage, of society. We carry them. It's not by the state that we defend them, it's by groups in margin of the state. They are not less present in the public sphere. They are even more present in the public sphere because they are occupying spaces that are available in democracy. Whether democracy is or is not, by democracy, there's a decentralization of the state. Democracy. One of the fields of moral connected with the final ends, the end of life, that is the most occupied by religion, by believers that carry a faith and a social ideal, is the field of intervention in concerning immigrants and how to integrate immigrants in our society. We had 135 organizations at the beginning of the year 2000, 135 organizations involved in helping immigrants. Over 135 organizations that were intervening with immigrants and refugees. 92% of these organizations had a religious charter at their founding. Since it's as the founding, it doesn't change today. There would be more today, but 92%, that's a lot. That they intervene in society to establish a certain social justice. Those are religious principles. We talk about a moral order. There are now principles of law that defend this. It's odd that we always bring back the question of immigration to a question of right. When we talk about immigration in the public sphere, we're looking for anthropologists and mainly lawyers, but that's not finally that we should interrogate. We should interrogate theologians, religious scholars. What motivates people to invite the people from other countries, except if it's not an ideal of a new life? Often these people may change them from countries is motivated by faith, which means that what we live as a way of life, we don't agree for different reasons, whether it be economic or political. We look for something else. We seek to establish and to live a certain societal ideal in our life, in our personal life. That's what brings us to migrate, to move to the new country. Because there are principles in our faith that we'll explore in what follows, which will bring us to receive the other. It's not a state mandate to be generous and to help the other. It has a religious essence in its founding, not the state, but our religious motivation is at stake. So faith plays a role in the public sphere, a very important sphere. It's in the hospital practice, which is the third part of what I'm sharing about. We're doing well for time? Very good. First and foremost, we have certain very ancient, which we think is new, but actually is quite old. In monotheist faith, it's an example that I take again here not because it is excluded in other confessions, because it's the one that I know the best. The intervention of Christians at the moment of a war to establish justice during this war. That's a very important element with Christians. We have a first manifestation, a first example of this intervention, which was happened in 410 of our era. So 1,600 years ago, this was told to us by Augustine of Hippo, commonly known as Saint Augustine, who tells in his magistral work, The City of God. It's a whole philosophy and theology of history starts from a historic fact, very precise fact that the destruction of Rome in 410 and the way Christians took care of those who were victims of war, the refugees. All the Christian theology of history starts from an event of taking care of refugees. Even the Christian theocracy after were based on the City of God, but by ignoring the most important part of St. Augustine, how they took care of refugees. What Augustine said, look at how the Christians opened the doors of the Basilica when there was the sack of Rome, the destruction of Rome, but not only to receive Christians, but also pagans. After the destruction of Rome, we heard critics against Christians. Pagans will say if Rome fell, it was the fault of the Christians because they didn't adore, worship the Roman gods. And Augustine would say, yes, but when you had wars, you would not even took care of people of your own religion, but we took care of everybody. That's what we could talk in bello, justice in war. There's justice of war, the reason why we do war. That's one thing that Augustine developed as well. But first, justice in war that we can also extrapolate in a justice after war, jus post bellum. The three criteria to establish justice in war is proportionality, discrimination, and good faith. So we need to explain those three elements: proportionality. So to be justice in war, it cannot be the Russian troops against three enemy mercenaries. There's a disproportion, obviously. To have a war, have justice in war, it has to be with equal power and arms. But when it's an army that is repressing its population, there's no proportionality. How can we compensate? We can say to the government, use less arms to attack your enemy. But actually, the people who will run away from the war because of disproportion, because they see there's no hope, I can receive them. That's where hospitality becomes a form of justice, justice to bring reparations. The other element is discrimination. For a war to be just, according to Augustine, we have to be fighting between soldiers. So we see today that is not what happens. Civils, women, and children are attacked, are victims as well. I could say to the government, me, Martin Bellerose, will knock to the government and says, please stop to kill children. If I come out alive of this meeting, I will not have an impact anyhow. But what I can do to compensate for this non-discrimination, because it is a question of discriminate between soldiers and civils, but I can take care of those who are victims of that war and establish a certain justice externally, obviously. And my faith calls me to receive them as it happened in 410. And for a war, for their justice to really happen in such a war, it has to be led by good faith. So everybody is of good faith, but never in the sense of the other. Obviously, this criteria is difficult to measure and to respect because it is very subjective. We cannot subtract it of this subjectivity. Once again, the good faith of those who receive. So the situation of a conflict is to change place, and that's where the actions of hospitality is towards the person victims of the war, and it's odd that Christians have assumed. It's not only Christians. We have all kinds of stories in all the religions, especially those that I know a little bit, where there's an intervention in this way and in the favor of those who are victims of those conflicts. And it happens often in the with refugees, how we take care of the refugees. That's what Augustine said.
Donc, la praxis hospitalière
the praxis of hospitality becomes a political, that doesn't necessarily take a favor of one political policy versus another, but has an impact on policies. By the how people are taking care of people. What are the criteria of this hospitality? I present to you here a source text of a story that's common to the three Abrahamic faiths, as well for the Jews, Christians, and Muslims, which is the text is first and foremost common to the one I use for Jews and Christians, the story. That's what we call with Christians the theophany of Mamre. In other words, the apparition of God, of Abraham, who appears as three visitors. It's not a coincidence that we talk about three visitors. We have, therefore, 5 characteristics of the hospitality in Mamre. First and foremost, the text says that Abraham was sitting at the entrance of his tent, and standing next to him was the 3 visitors. We also say that Abraham rose and ran towards them to go and bow before them. This passage is a nonsense and such. If they are standing close to him, why Abraham will he run towards him? I do not run to Isabel, she's right next to me. It doesn't make sense to say this at first sight, but from a perspective of hospitality, it has a lot of sense. Hospitality means first and foremost to go towards the other. We do not go only by waiting for the other at home, but to go and get him when we need to, by going to invite him. This will provoke a certain reciprocity. So I place the discourse, the religious discourse on hospitality a bit in margin in opposition to the philosophical discourse on hospitality. Jacques Derrida spoke of a free hospitality which didn't require such a reciprocity. I will greet someone who will not necessarily greet me in response. For those who carry faith, of an Abraham faith, we go in a different direction. We attach to the greeting of the other, reciprocity. We consider that the option of a better life, of salvation, we already have received everything. We can only offer freely in exchange. First and foremost, by placing ourselves in the position of going towards the other, Abraham gave the possibility of his visitors to reject him as well. So he places himself in a position of equality, because the one who receives doesn't need to tell you, always have the possibility to say, no, I do not receive you. It's him who has the big end of the stick, as we say in Quebecois. They can reject or accept the other. By placing himself in a position where he goes towards the other, he places himself in a position that he can be rejected by the ones he is trying to greet, to receive. He places himself in a position of reciprocity and equality in this relationship. The reciprocity. It's also the possibility to offer to the other this reciprocity, the possibility to receive me or not receive me, because it's not to offer freely. It places us in a position of paternalism. Do I offer as well the possibility to the other to receive me? If I offer that possibility, we place ourselves in a position of equality. If I don't offer to the other the possibility to receive me, I place myself above the other. I'm always the one who decides. I'm the one who receives and that is at home. And that's something that we want to avoid as those who carry an Abrahamic faith. We are all equal in front of God. So this reciprocity remains important. It's like, take for example, we invite you at Christmas, for example, a very Christian example. We are in a, let's say, not in a very good economic situation. Because don't worry, Martin, we won't give each other presents today. All we want is for you to come and to be present. We go, the whole family. Everyone has gifts for us, and we don't have any for other. It's really uncomfortable. We also would like to offer. Next year, we are going to invite again, but this time, we assure us that we won't have be exchanging gifts and so on, and don't worry. And we go again with fear, and our fears are justified. We are receive again gifts, and we have nothing for the other. The third year, we reject the invitation because we want as well to be able to offer to the other. When a person receives, his profound desires to be able as well to receive, to give to the other, to be able to offer, not only to be the one who benefits from the help of others, but the one who gives to the other. And it's often the way in which we could truly measure, it's a term, tricky term, it's the integration. If someone becomes truly integrated and at home when he offers himself hospitality to the other, and it's appropriate to the place where he's living. Even if the people that are native of this place will not necessarily have a good reaction to this. The second criteria in the theophany of memory is the collective dimension. There are three visitors, and Abraham puts to work his wife Sarah to prepare bread, and a young servant to go and get a veal that he will himself prepare. This collective dimension is important. It's one thing to receive one-to-one. We're ready to receive everybody. But when it's a collectivity, that's where it becomes a bit scary. When it asks a collective effort, that's where we see it very well in the Quebec politics right now, where it starts to become difficult. The collective dimension is essential because it is a collective gesture, immigration. You already heard, certainly, for those who were not born in Quebec, we will speak in bad of your community. I'll take, for example, concerning me, my wife is from Colombia, and I would say, well, for me, the Colombians, I can't take them, but you know, that's different. Oh, blacks, I can't. No, I can't. Arabs, I can't. But for you, it's okay. So there's a fundamental truth in this, which is revealed to us, that when we know a person, already we change opinion about her. We're guided from global prejudices, but when we have a private connection with the person, that things change. So it's important to have a collective dimension, but it's important to have, as the third criteria, to keep the classic hospitality. In other words, we receive someone to eat at our house, to have to drink at home, to offer hospitality. Because in Quebec, there is the inverse problem. People get involved with the rights of refugees, but never ate at this same table as a refugee. We lose something, obviously. It's important to keep this interpersonal contact, but also to seize them as collective dimension. There are those two elements very present in the text of the Théophanie of Mambré. The fourth characteristics is the eschatological promise. It seems strange a bit, but the visitors repeat to Abraham that they will give a descendant to Sarah, which Sarah thinks is a bit odd, because with the age of Sarah and the age of my spouse, it's not possible. It cannot happen. Abraham was promised a land, and as soon as he put his foot on the land, 6 verses further down, the Lord said, I will give it to your descendants, but he doesn't even have a descendant. How can he believe such a thing? And that's when the adventure of faith starts, because we believe in this promised land, even if it seems impossible to the descendants because it doesn't exist. The example of Abraham touches me a lot. Abraham had his children at an advanced age, as I did. My first child, I was 52 years old when I had my first child. I was asking God that he would grant my wish a little bit before Abraham, please. So he listened to me. He gave me enough time. And there. This eschatological promise, when he promises to Sarah a son, he repeats the promise of a land. In the Christian text, this eschatological discourse by excellence, we find the text on the final judgment in Matthew 25, verse 25-36. Jesus put to his right those who are saved, to his left those who are not saved. And why do we find ourselves to your right, Lord, to those who are right? Because I was hungry, you gave me to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. You was a stranger. I was a stranger. I was sick. You came to visit me. All gestures of hospitality. The essence of the kingdom of God is based on moral gestures, which is about how you greet the immigrant and the stranger. It is the essence of faith. Once again, I say it for the Christian faith, but it's also true for the Abrahamic faiths completely. The fifth criteria, we don't find it in the text of the Théophanie of Mambré, but This is the greeting that Lot gave to two of those three visitors who went to visit Abraham. Two of them came to gave a message to Sodom where Lot was. That's where we find the third criteria, which is the one criteria of protection. It's also to give protection, to receive the other is to give protection. The two strangers come in the city. They do not want to stay with Lot. They want to sleep on the public place. They know, don't do that. Tricks them, brings them home, offers them everything that has basic hospitality asks to offer. And then the men of Sodom came to the doors of the home of Lot and tells them, bring them out that we could know them, which is a soft translation. The other translation would say, bring them out that we can have sexual relations with them. Homosexual relation, obviously, it was Sodom, not for nothing. And Lot refuses. He even gives his daughters in exchange. It's an extreme example, but he cannot give and he cannot not protect his guests, those who found refuge in his home. So what did the men of the downtown of Sodom to say to Lot? You yourself, you're a stranger in our city. We greeted you as a stranger. Now you make you the one to correct us of our wrongs. We'll do worse to you than to your guests. And sometimes we have a bit this feeling when we want to integrate into a place, for example, in Quebec, those who appropriate themselves this society, which we should desire as natives here, that they could appropriate themselves of this place. When we take liberty to greet others as, hey, you're not at home. That's where that reality comes back. There's a double thing here, the protection, but protection which will go as well, will be transformed, which will be appropriation of the place in which we live. The fact of being as a native in the place where we live is a form of protection as well. We are a part of those to whom this place belongs. That's what we want to develop. And that is a part of the ideal. Once again, the Abrahamic ideal. We want to protect the other, but the other will not stay a stranger within our walls. He has to become a part of becomes one of ours. It's not the case of Lot. He was in a strange land. Now we'll see another example. The example of Rahab, the prostitute of Jericho, which will hide the spies of the Lord. She says, take care of me, protect me, and save me when you will take over Jericho, and that which they will do. She was accepted in the people of Israel, and she became famous, actually very well known in the faith of Israel, in the Christian faith, for her hospitality and her faith. It goes together because hospitality is a faith with hospitality is a dead faith. You heard certainly faith without works is a faith that's dead. But what we don't say in the citation, because we cite clearly James, the letter of James 2, 24, 26, what we say is the works we don't say, we talk about is the works of hospitality of Rahab. We take the example of Rahab and those verses. Those works are works of hospitality. And Rahab became involved directly in the people of Israel, and she became the ancestor of Jesus, and she even became the great-great-grandmother of King David, King of the Jews. Even though we say that Jewish faith is transmitted by the mother, and we have a strange prostitute from a different nationality who gave birth to the Jewish people. That's an incredible lesson of hospitality. She was protected because we took care of her at a certain time. We protected her from the enemy. We protected her as well by making her one of ours,
membre à part entière
a
du
member,
peuple
full
des élus,
member
par
of
sa
the
foi,
chosen people,
qui
by
s'est
her
exprimée
faith, which
par
was
la
expressed
pratique
by
hospitalière.
the practice of hospitality.
Donc, évidemment,
Evidently,
ça a un impact politique sur
this
la
has a
configuration.
political
Qu'est-ce que le
impact
peuple
on
d'Israël?
configuration. What is the
Est-ce que
people of
c'est
Israel?
quelqu'un
Is it
à
someone that
l'époque
is
de Rahab, est-ce que c'est
at
quelqu'un
the
qui est
time of Rahab,
génétiquement né
that is
dans le sein
genetically
d'Israël? Pas
born
selon ce texte-là.
within Israel?
Le peuple
Not that
d'Israël,
text. The
c'est ceux qui
people
vont
of Israel
croire
are
en Dieu.
those who carry the
C'est
faith
ceux
in
qui
God,
communient à la même foi.
are those who commune to
Donc,
the same faith.
il y a toute une définition
So
de la
there's
nation, définition
an
donc de
incredible
l'État qui
definition of
vient
the
avec ça.
nation, of the
Qui
state
sera
that comes
protégé
with
par
this.
l'État?
Who will be
Qui
protected
appartient
by
à
the
cet
state?
État-là?
Who
C'est ceux
belongs
qui
to the
croient au
state
même Dieu.
is those who believe
Il
in the
s'agit là
same
donc d'une
God.
action à portée
So it
politique,
is
mais
a
qui s'opère dans son
question of
essentiel en
political
dehors des
breadth
pouvoirs
that
politiques,
is
en dehors des
established
sphères de
outside of
l'État.
the spheres of state.
Exactement comme Jésus lui-même,
Exactly,
ça c'est ce
like
que
Jesus
j'offe en
himself.
conclusion,
That's what I
ce
offer in
que Jésus
conclusion.
lui-même était, en
What
fait, un Messie à
Jesus
l'envers,
was a
quand on
Messiah, an
attendait
upside down
un
Messiah,
Messie chez les
a
Juifs,
reverse
c'était un
Messiah. When we were
Messie
expecting a
politique,
Messiah
Messie qui allait
with
prendre
the
le
Jews, it
pouvoir,
was
qui
a
allait
political
établir le
Messiah
royaume de Dieu au
who was
centre de
going to
bâti
establish the
la terre.
kingdom of heaven
Et
in a
non, il est
political way.
exactement
No,
à
he
l'inverse
became
de ce qu'on
the
attendait du
inverse of
Messie.
what we
Il est
expected of the
venu de
Messiah.
l'extérieur
He
des
came
sphères,
of the outside of the spheres of
un
power,
paysan qu'on appelle
a
Jésus
peasant
sans
that
titre.
we call Jesus without a
Un paysan
title,
sans terre en plus, parce que charpentier.
a peasant
Aujourd'hui, on voit
without a
les
land
artisans
because
comme
he's a
plus haut
carpenter.
dans
Now we
l'échelle
see
sociale que les paysans, ce qui n'était pas le cas à l'époque,
our,
parce que l'artisan, en fait, c'est un
uh,
paysan sans
I'm sorry,
terre, qui est obligé de trouver une
artisans
autre
are
façon de
people
vivre
without
et
land
qui est plus
that have to
pauvre.
find another way to
Il est venu
live.
en
So that
dehors des
he
structures
came
du
from
pouvoir
outside of the
politique.
structures of political power.
Puis il a ainsi placé
And
la foi chrétienne
he
dans un
thus placed the
espace
Christian
du
faith in a
contre-pouvoir.
space of
Quelqu'un
counter
peut
power.
désormais dire,
Someone
je
can
prends
say,
position au nom de Dieu,
I
Dieu me
take
révèle
position in
telle
the name of
chose
God,
sans
God
avoir
reveals
aucun
me a
pouvoir
certain thing
politique, ce
without
qui
having any
m'était
political
absolument
power,
inimaginable
which was
avant.
totally impossible to imagine before.
Donc, toute force de
So,
transformation
all
sociale
force
en
of
dehors de
social
l'État
transformation outside of the state
peut maintenant se réclamer
can
de Dieu
now
lui-même.
be
Quelqu'un qui
claimed
n'a
of
jamais eu de
God
pouvoir
himself.
peut
Someone
dire,
who
oui,
never
bon, Dieu
has
m'a révélé
powers
quelque
can say,
chose, c'est
yes,
pour ça
God
que je le
revealed
défends dans
something
la
to me.
sphère
That's why I
publique.
defend him in this public
Dieu m'a
sphere.
révélé, par exemple,
God
l'importance
revealed to me the
d'accueillir l'autre,
importance of
l'importance
receiving the
d'offrir
other,
l'hospitalité.
of
En
offering
passant, le mot
hospitality. By the way,
hospitalité,
the word
un des mots qui est traduit
hospitality,
par
one of the
hospitalité
words
en
that is
français qui vient de la
translated by
Bible,
hospitality in French
c'est
comes from the Bible is
philoxénia, l'amour pour
philoxenia,
l'étranger. On en
love
a
of
fait
the
un verbe.
stranger.
En
We
fait,
made a
c'est
verb out of
pratiquer
it.
l'amour pour
It's
l'étranger, c'est ça,
practicing
offrir
love for the
l'hospitalité.
stranger.
Et ça, c'est un principe
That's offering
fondamental,
hospitality.
encore
It's
une
a
fois, pour les
fundamental
foi,
principle.
plus
Once
que
again,
jamais
for
pour
faiths
les
more
foi
than that,
abrahamiques.
for
C'est
Abrahamic faiths.
un élément
It
essentiel,
is an
fondamental.
essential and fundamental element.
Voilà, je m'arrête ici.
I will stop
Je vais
here.
laisser
Thank you very
la
much.
chance
I will give a chance
les interlocuteurs
to
d'intervenir.
my
Merci.
other
Merci.
speakers to intervene and then to your questions.
Merci, Monsieur Bellerose.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Bellerose.
C'est rassurant. Hein? Des
It's
personnes de
reassuring,
foi
isn't it?
ensemble,
People of
on
faith
a pu
together,
faire une différence.
we can make a
En tout cas,
difference.
on va laisser le
So we will
répondre à
now
Monsieur
for
Bellerose,
to
première
respond,
personne.
first
C'est Monsieur
person,
Roger Alfani. Monsieur
Mr.
Roger
Raji
malheureusement
Alfani.
ne peut pas être aujourd'hui ici
He
parce qu'il a
cannot
été
be
placé en
here
Afrique
because he had to
et
go
il
to
va nous
Africa.
parler depuis l'Internet.
He will
Monsieur,
speak to us
je crois
from the
que la
internet.
technique s'occupe de ça.
I think the
Je vais
technique
vous
is taking
présenter
care of
Monsieur
it.
Roger
I
Alfani.
will
Il a
introduce to
déjà
you
été
Mr. Alfani.
sur une conférence. Oui, on va le
He
voir
was,
ici.
we see him here
Est-ce que la fiche va être enlevée?
in a second.
OK, les techniciens s'en occupent.
Okay,
OK.
technicians are taking
Donc,
care of
Monsieur
it.
Roger Alfani, qui a déjà
Mr.
participé à une
Roger Alfani,
conférence
who
avec
participated
Monsieur
in a
Bellerose, et
conference
vous
with
allez
Mr.
comprendre.
Bellerose, and you will
Monsieur
understand
Roger
why.
Alfani
Mr. Roger
est
Alfani
professeur
is professor
à l'université.
at Seton Hall University in New Jersey.
Il est professeur à l'université Seton Hall au New Jersey, aux États-Unis, où il enseigne,
Where he
entre
teaches
autres, au
in
département
the
de corps
departments
et
of core and
diplomatie
diplomacy and
et relations
international relations,
internationales.
amongst others.
Ses travaux de
His
recherche
current research
actuels
focuses
portent
on the
sur
relationship
les
between
relations
religion
entre
and
religion
migration,
et migration
which means
et,
refugees, and
et
the
l'intersection entre les
intersection between
religions et
religion
la
and foreign
politique
policy.
étrangère.
He is a recipient of the prestigious U.S. National Endowment of the Humanities Fellowship for his research on Congolese refugees in Burundi, Uganda, Kenya, and the United States, including returnees to Congo.
Burundi, de l'Ouganda et du Kenya et aux États-Unis, incluant les rapatriés du Congo.
Yes, including returnees to Congo. In addition to several publications in French and English, Professor Alfani is author of Religious Peace Building in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Monsieur Alfani, merci.
Mr. Alfani, thank you for being with us.
On n'entend pas? Technique. Non. Ah, Monsieur Alfani, votre micro est éteint. Monsieur Alfani, votre micro est éteint.
Ouais, c'est là.
Est-ce que là, vous m'entendez?
Oui.
C'est parfait.
Okay, good. Merci.
Okay, now we can hear.
Je vous remercie,
So I thank you to give me, allow me to speak and to offer some reflections on this problematic of which we are all concerned. I say hello to Montreal. Good afternoon here in Western Africa and in Bamako in Mali, where I have the experience here, that of which Professor Martin Bellerose shared, which is about hospitality. I don't originate from Mali, but I spent a big part of my life in Mali, in Bamako, where I was received and integrated as a member of Mali, as a citizen of Mali. I would have wanted to be with you today, but for reasons of health and family, that I had to come to West Africa. I want to thank Mr. Famularo, Duffy, Mr. Duffy, and Mrs. Lorraine, and all the organizers for this initiative to speak about immigration. My answer to the presentation and to what Professor Bellerose gave to me will be based on 3 points. And it will be mainly based on the notes I have received. And I will ask certain questions in which we could, on the basis of which we could exchange a bit later. I will situate firstly and generally the problem of immigration, or more precisely forced migration. Speak ici of forced migration because that is a field, the field in which I am involved presently. I will explain a bit later. And secondly, I will comment concerning certain questions regarding the presentation we just heard. And I will conclude thirdly by proposing some reflections of ways of solutions for this problem for which we're all concerned. I hope that in the same way. Before we start, I will use the thematic of this presentation, of this conference, which is formulated in the form of a question. Immigration, a problem. That's where I stopped when I was invited to share or comment and discuss the presentation of Professor Bellerose. So one can be asked, is it a question of immigration as a thematic, that is a problem.
Pour certains, la thématique
For
serait en
certain
soi
people, the
un
thematic
sujet
is
qui susciterait certaines controverses.
a subject that could be considered controversial, or as we say in Quebec, a hot potato. Immigration is also seen under an institution. Professor Bellerose was talking about the two institutions. If we include religion as a being part of that definition that we are being offered, that is being offered to the institution. Immigration also lives in an institutional perspective. In other words, for those observers that consider them as they will focus on the variable or the institutional variable relative to this problematic. Whatever the question that is being asked, what role, for example, would play the state institution and international agencies? I think at UNHCR, Commissioner on Refugees, the OEM, the International Office of Immigration, and the migration process. Another approach is where Professor Bellerose focused on his presentation on this category, that we should consider. I really appreciated his presentation here, that it is concerned that is almost never consulted when there is a question that concerns them. These are the subjects themselves. I'm referring to immigrants themselves. All categories confused. I think of those asking for refugee status, temporary workers, economic migrants, etc. In a general way, it is here. That's where the grouping that we see in the media, the amalgam, the stereotypes that are consolidated and that in the public conscience when we speak about immigrants. Roger, this letter, and others have made wonderful research in connecting with refugees and their political consequences they engender. This brings me to reformulate in a provocative way the question in the following form. Is it the immigrant that is a problem, or the immigration as such? Is the subject himself causing a problem in this space in which he finds himself? Is it the immigrant or the refugees who poses problem? For the media and the public sphere and in the public in various spheres, in a general way, the problem is posed on that angle. Thinking that it is a question simply, we speak today of the electoral elections. It's not just about a electoral candidate, that we should blame or stigmatize, but these questions are being posed in the various forms of reception we give to the people coming from abroad, immigrating. If we think that the problem is just on the other side of the frontier of the border, there's certain hypocrisy or voluntary blinding, conscious of the question of politicization and the bad media representation or the negative media representation of this problem, especially in this electoral period. As we see it presently, particularly in the United States, it is largely because of this that this thematic preoccupies us and finds its whole pertinence. Mr. Bellerose is speaking of a historic French fact at the beginning of the 20th century, in particular the law of 1905 in France, which marked in a way the separation between the church and the state, but and it was introducing from another part the secularism. The presentation of Professor Bellerose proposes to analyze, to look at the religious values. He passed a good part of his presentation and his conclusion to speak about those values. This, which were my point of view, are elements which would allow us to gauge not our level of reception, of receivability of those who are not necessarily a part, who don't represent necessarily the majority of the space we are occupying. These reflections, which are mainly Christians, which facilitate in such a certain way the institution of the concerned persons, the works. So various works can show more in detail this process of humanization that we reject in society, that we're called to receive and to greet. I would invite those who don't know these writings to look into it. It is important to understand that the values, for example, hospitality, generosity, altruism, dignity and solidarity, human solidarity, are not exclusive to one tradition or to religious people. They are simply human. Since they are not institution or organization who introduced them. Jean-Jacques Rousseau would say, in contrary to Thomas Hobbes, that these values are intrinsically human. And it's for us to show those values that are rooted in reference, I'm referring here to the letters of Paul to the Romans, that these religious or spiritual spaces would favor their expression, even in period of war, as we heard for a few moments. Professor Bellerose explained well in his notes. I would have liked to hear him more on the connections we can make, if there is such connection, that there's a connection to be made between this behavior, these norms and ethics that the humans adopt before the war. As it said, during war and even after the war. What is the connection we can do between the two? Is there a parallel to do between the two contexts? How we could put them in application, for example, in our daily life, especially if they're founded on Christian values? Which language can we use to convince or to share those realities with other institutions, state institutions in particular, to benefit of these, to receive those benefits, in other words? According to the report of UNHCR, there were more than 117 million of forced migrants in the world, including 43 million of refugees, which represents a little more than the population of Canada and 5 times more the population of Quebec. To understand the migratory problematic is, in order to find a sustainable solution, it requires a global understanding of the phenomena, including its profound causes. We try often to find solutions without necessarily understand what pushes the other to leave what that person considers home. And so they interviewed more than 300 refugees and in different countries, including the United States. I can assure you that none wants to leave their home and become a refugee. Those people are humans like you and me. They're not researching a certain sympathy in order to find solution to their problems, but I think they are searching for true human solidarity from our states, communities, and religious institutions or other. And I would conclude here by saying truth, human solidarity goes beyond, is not situated necessarily on the integration and repatriation of those individuals or refugees. I really appreciated the elaboration of Professor Bellerose on the different criteria of hospitality. He spent certain times to explain the morphology and the applications of this term hospitality, to offer to the other and to have an approach of equality, which is counter-colonial. It brings us to leave our zones of comfort to come to get to know the other, not by inviting him to be like us, but by offering openness to what this meeting can give us. I thank you for the time. I will be ready for some questions if it is possible. Thank you.
Merci, professeur Alfani. Pour ce que je n'avais pas présenté dès le début, pour donner donc pour répondre encore à
To answer to the presentation of Mr. Bellerose, we'll have Mr. Sari and Mr. Duffy. Mr. Abdelaq Sari is Councillor of Montréal-Nord, the district Marie-Clarac, my district. He is official opposition critic for public safety and fight against racism and systemic discrimination, and the technique of information, vice president of the Public Safety Commission and member of the Committee on Economic and Urban Development and Housing. Mr. Sari, the floor is yours. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. And Macy, thank you for giving me the opportunity to express myself on the subject so important in this present context and the time when we want to intervene on a subject. Generally, when we're invited, we always expect to have a certain expertise, and when we use the term expertise, there's always a way in which a human, whichever his origin, will interpret it, because it is an information that he has or a knowledge, but he cannot dissociate it completely of his history, of his life experience, of his experience. That's why, before I start, Mrs. Lorraine, which is a friend, actually, where did I meet Mrs. Lorraine the first time? And we're still good friends, even if we can diverge sometimes. And I hope we will always have a divergence of opinions, because it gives a certain wealth, because we saw it in the table of consultation of the leaders, religious leaders of Montreal-Nord. It's very interesting. I continue to work with Madame Lorraine, because I think the goal, the very important, critical in the present context. I say that I wanted to give my background, and I want to introduce myself as an immigrant. I'm an immigrant. I had my first studies in an evangelical school. I'm Muslim, practicing as Sunni Muslim, teacher in university. I'm a teacher, and so everything comes from this background. I'm an immigrant, whether we like it or not. When we say, is immigration a problem, question mark, we can first, when we hear it from the point of we can say immigration or emigration, which is completely different. That's where we'll see the problem. Is that a problem that we live as being received in a country? Then that's immigration. Or are we talking about emigration, which pushed Mr. Sari to come to Quebec? I'm very lucky, because I'm an immigrant that took the initiative to explore. I got a diploma as an engineer, had an experience in Morocco and in France, but now I'd like to go to North America. Well, it's a beautiful, wonderful life. And some people had, some people ran their country because they were in danger. That's a different form of immigration. That's a real human problem. He may be religious or politic, but it's human first and foremost. When the first intervention of Mr. Bill, which I find very interesting, when we talk about the types of war, I really like the real war movie in which, so when they say, give me your soldier and we give you your soldier, that's civils, because we really wanted to end the war as quickly as possible. We didn't want it, but it was a little more human than what we live today. Today, or as we speak, those are not wars. It's not human at all. It's something else. When we speak about immigration, the intervention which we had of immigration, of how we received immigrant, I come from the Kingdom of Morocco. I'm proud of it. Why? Because in my story, I was very, very young and I was going to the biblical school because I was not in a Muslim school. I was in an evangelical school, and I had a Jewish person living in with me that we were renting an apartment to, and it was Ramadan. And I talked to my father, does he do Ramadan? Does he do Ramadan? Go and ask him. Why ask me? Ask him. We receive him in everything. And at that time, because we in Morocco were proud of it, to today we received people who left the wars in Europe, including Jewish people. And today in Morocco, we receive other immigrants. I think it's in the way that we receive them. And what I like is that the reception is very good when we prepare the living room, the tea, the meal. But when it doesn't go well, when there's a difficult situation economically, when we don't have the economic capacity, that's where we'll see if you're truly a person who knows how to give hospitality. So that's where I come from, my level as a politician. I'm a councillor, as Madame Lorrain, of the Marie-Clarac district, Montréal-Nord. And Montréal-Nord, we're in Montreal first, a city where there's a lot of refugees. We have to call a cat a cat. In Montreal-Nord, before we could come a little bit back in 2016, where I was elected, me and Mrs. Lorraine, other religious leaders, other organization, we had already a certain capacity, but in this capacity, it was an incapacity to receive, but we can close our doors. But we cannot close our doors. It's really deeply connected. So I'm proud to come from Montreal-Nord, from Morocco and from Montreal, because organization receive with difficulty. We do not have enough services. But do we stop to receive people? The answer is clearly no. Is it a problem? The problem is that in the municipal decision, we're very late because we receive them and we're not ready. Nobody consulted me. We're being told you're going to receive them because you have housing, you have sporting facilities. Already the service that we give wasn't sufficient. But will we stop to receive them? The answer is clearly no. We must continue to work and strongly without putting the person we receive to be uncomfortable. If we come home and we have only one chicken and we're 6 people, we shouldn't make our visitor feel like he's not welcome. We have to eat and be comfortable. And when it doesn't go well, I don't want to remind you that you're someone that came from outside. I really like the history of the host. When I read the Quran, and it's the same thing, word for word. When he talked about Sarah, is the name Isaac, which means from the smile, because she smiled. That's why we called him Isaac, like Ishmael, because you believed in him and we responded to you. Those are the words that come from. Whether it be biblical or in the Quran, it's the same thing, and it's very important. And it comes in the way that we greet and receive people. That's where, in Montreal-Nord, is immigration a problem? Is it a problem because no, it's not a problem. Is it a problem that we have to bring up so we can receive them well? Of course, the answer is yes. I would like to that we could receive immigrants better. If my wife invites a family and friends, I want to really receive them as well. We have to do in such that we can receive them well, because in the actual infrastructure is sometimes lacking. In Montréal-Nord and Saint-Michel and Côte-des-Neiges in Montréal-Nord, we are in the boroughs receiving the most people. Why? Is it because we are more, it's a better place to be received? No, because like me, when I came in 2002 as an immigrant, I would have liked to have a Moroccan close to me. It helps me. A Haitian, a Syrian, an Iraqi, a Palestinian, and here it's just someone who came from Congo or Congolese or Malian. It helps. So this concentration, the more it keeps increasing, it grows with time. That's why it becomes a more simple and easy way to receive these new immigrants. So after the municipal, what happens? What happens? Is it a problem? It's a challenge based on which we have concerning housing. I never experienced it, Isabel, either, but I know some people who are of various origins who sleep right now at Parque Mena. So, you know, the Parque Emiliana. And I really liked, I didn't change a lot since Isabel knew me. When I go to the mosque, I stay with refugees at the mosque, but I would like to eat with them. When you sit down on the floor and you eat with them, maybe he will take care of my problem. Maybe if I call him, he will call me, answer me. It helps. When you go to the park and you stay for 1 hour in the cold with them, because now we speak to one another. They slept last night in Parc des Menants. Is that a problem? If somebody tells me it's not a problem, he has a problem. Because for me, I turn on the heating because it's cold. With I have a roof, I have insulation. He doesn't control. They cannot control the temperature. For me, humanly, it's a problem. Do we have help in the borough because of this? We eat well. We even waste a lot of food. We sleep in a warm place. I'm actually responsible. I'm an elected official. They chose me. I have a problem even more so in my conscience, and I'm a Muslim. So the Muslim conscience of my neighbor who doesn't eat. I'm not a good Muslim. If your neighbor is cold and you're warm, you have a problem. Take care of your neighbor. So he's sleeping outside. It's truly a problem. If people don't consider it like a problem, we can always receive them in this way. So for me, it's a big problem with everything. Lastly, I will speak as a politician. You have to be very careful when we bring this problem with politicians or in a general way. We live presently in a very neoliberal society. Neoliberalism in this way will be painful for any concept because it goes in an electoral way. If have an interest to be versus a group, whether it be minority or not, I will try to give them what they want. Let's think that it will not harm, but it can truly harm because the system itself, based on faith, and there's other types of system as well. Human is by losing these values. Now I will stop because I know that you're eager to ask questions. I will dare to answer as many questions. I thank you for all the people of Federation. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Sari. We see that the subject from various perspectives, and we need now a more of a philosophical aspect. We'll ask Mr. Duffy to answer now. Wait a minute, Mr. Duffy, I have to introduce him to you. He's General Secretary of Universal Peace Federation in Canada. Mr. Duffy studied in economy and philosophy in Western University in Ontario. He was involved in the unification movement of Canada since the beginning of the 1970s. The Secretary General of the Universal Peace Federation since 2017, and he has been involved in the organization of various conferences and webinars on problems connected with national concerns, including seminar on immigration and spirituality in 2023. He's married, father of 5 adult kids. What he forgets is that he's grandfather for 4 grandchildren.
Je parle en anglais parce que
I will speak in English.
Will do too much damage.
Too much.
Je m'excuse pour le dérangement.
Monsieur Alfani, quelques minutes, on s'installe sur le plan technique. Alors, je pense qu'on peut reprendre maintenant. Notre interprète est remonté. Tout le monde s'assoit. Et donc, on laisse la parole à Monsieur Duffy, le secrétaire général de la Fédération pour la paix universelle.
Merci, madame. So, I'll try and be brief in the interest of lunch. This is a very dense presentation and a very rich and full subject that is being explored here. And we certainly, it's great to have reflections on the subject, but I don't suppose we can arrive at conclusions. As a good councillor mentioned, you know, as a city councillor, he's dealing with real time, real situations on the ground, and we're talking theological reflection and maybe philosophical reflection as far as how these ideas, which are important, affect eventually policy and political action, and how does faith fit into the gap between political, governmental, state involvement in immigration and the missing dimension that used to be filled by religion. So I was interested in how Professor Bellerose talked about the movement of belief to faith, the movement from looking back to how we were structured in our religious life in the Christian world, and it may be also the same in other religious contexts, to the movement toward faith, where we more fully own our own spirituality and practice our spirituality in our everyday life, not looking for authorities to give it to us. Also, the move from privatized faith and private spheres of life because of the breakdown of family and so on, into pushing us into the public sphere. And I include in that the Googleization and the Facebooking of the modern world, where we're exposed through social media to our private lives are exposed to the entire world, as it were. So all of this is changing the dynamics of how non-state actors contribute to the life of a community, and we're talking here about immigration. So how does what formerly was an institutional involvement, like the Catholic Church or other churches, or we can think of any religious institution here, and in the end, that gap is created, and civil society emerges out of the exit, let's say, of Christians from their religious authorities. Karl Barth even mentioned that religion is unbelief, that it's antithetical to belief, but in this sense, that civil society grows out of the diminution of the effect of religious institutions in society. And I like also the hospitality practice as a political action where faith plays a critical role. And I recalled, when I was thinking about this, the writings of a French philosopher and former Minister of National Education, Luc Ferry, who talks about this link between immigration and insecurity in France, particularly now, because of the failure of the state to follow its own immigration policy. But he's also written on the subject of a philosophy of love for the 21st century, a philosophy called On Love, which he references the tendency of ordinary people to take refugees into their homes and are donors for the alleviation of victims of natural disasters and so on, as indicators of a new value placed on the public expression of love of neighbor, and thus love of God. He's a secular philosopher, but he's pointing to one of many voices pointing to the kind of end of modernity, and we know this now. We're in a post-modernity, post-secularism, post-liberalism, post-Christianity, post-everything in the modern world, and so people are trying to find new paradigms in which to understand how to live together successfully in the amalgamation or the confluence of cultures that has come about in the last, particularly in the last 50 years or so. And so we're living in a different kind of world where immigration is, as somebody mentioned, forced in some cases, I think Mr. Alfani, or is for various reasons, like coming for opportunity, or coming for a better life for the children, or escaping war, escaping persecution. There are many reasons for migration, but a larger context, which will always be, I think, religiously based, is that humanity is one family. Certainly, even from science, humanity is essentially one species. And so we have, from different points of view, and this is where UPF, Universal Peace Federation, takes its one of its key pillars of its thought process is that the humanity is one family under God, to give it a religious context, because that's where it comes. And we look at the United Nations as an organization. It was originally formed with this kind of Abrahamic approach to building a brotherhood of nations, which would obviate war. But it was essentially undermined and contaminated, dare I say, by member countries which were opposed to this basic premise and should not have really been involved, asked to join, because they didn't adhere to and still don't to the basic premises on which it was made. So I would pose a question on the matter of immigration that should be, I think, discussed, is that there's a tension between the state's obligation to manage immigration and the faith-based mandate to care for the outsider, the outcast, the refugee, the sojourner, the wayfarer. So this, I love the story of the Mamre Theophany, as Dr. Bellerose described, but it tends to characterize the visitor as a divine guest, and the analogy then that the immigrant is a divine guest. And a lot of what characterizes the impulse to reach out to and help the immigrant is based in this notion, in this idea that hospitality demands this, and that we treat the other as a moment of intervention from God. And so it's a wonderful, a beautiful thing. But my question is the immigrant always a divine guest? Is the immigrant always a divine guest, or is he sometimes a bad actor, or she? A bad actor, or simply misguided by unscrupulous entrepreneurs who promise that the streets are paved with gold and they have very unrealistic expectations of the place they're going to, and have been basically robbed in order to get there. Here I would say that the obligation of the state to manage immigration with its attendant security and economic consequences has to be balanced, or should be balanced certainly, with humanitarian obligation. The state's obligation, in fact, to abide by the UN Declaration of Human Rights, which almost no nation truly abides by. And also to be balanced with the non-state actors who are, like NGOs, who are trying to help immigrants settle or be received into a new country. So there's a need for balance there, and the UPF echoes this kind of United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, particularly Article 14, which is applicable here, that everyone has the right to seek and enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. Of course, persecution should be defined widely to include war, insurrection, unmitigated criminal activity, and so on. But UPF is not in a position as an institution, not equipped to play a significant role in migration justice actions. It's not equipped for that. It's certainly not funded adequately for that. However, individual unificationists or UPF members can be and are involved in these kinds of actions. The main role of Universal Peace Federation on this file is to hold frequent and widespread conferences and webinars on migration and immigration issues, And we do that globally. And I think if you check the website, upf.org, there are quite a few. There are quite a number of conferences going on. If you search immigration, you'll find quite a few conferences on an ongoing basis on this subject. And I think it's really important subject because it's one of the key factors that are defining a new global culture as we mix together humanities mixing together at the rate we are mixing together and learning to live with each other and understand each other. Like someone said, I think Dr. Bellerose said, you treat a person differently theoretically, but then when you're up close one-to-one, it's a very different matter. You realize the humanity of the other person, how similar they are to you and their life experiences are and so on. And so, you know, we're undergoing this kind of radical therapy, let's say, for the human family in coming together and realizing our common humanity. It's a bit of a challenge, and there's lots of work to do, but I think it will end up in a beautiful result, and we'll all be much better off and very grateful for it. So thanks for everyone and their comments, and thank you all for being here. Thank you.
Ça va être un petit peu compliqué, mais
It's going to be a little bit difficult, but
Alfani n'est pas sur
as
place, on
Mr.
aura le droit
Alfani
d'intervenir pour
will
davantage
have
discuter, mais on
time
va
to
prendre quelques
discuss a
questions
little more.
maintenant,
We'll
peut-être
take a few
spécifiques
questions,
directement
maybe a few
Monsieur
specific
Alfani.
to Mr. Alfani,
Pouvez être là.
and so we'll put him on the
Donc, si vous avez une
screen.
question,
So if you have a question,
présentez-vous, posez la question.
introduce yourself, ask the question, and say to whom you are addressing the question.
Spécifique pour Monsieur Alfani.
If you have a specific question to Mr. Alfani, let's start with that one.
Monsieur Alfani au mur, s'il vous plaît.
Can we put Mr. Alfani on the line?
Il était passage. On était passage.
On l'a pas mis au coin, on l'a pas mis au coin.
Mais juste au mur, pas au coin. Nombre de fois que moi j'étais mis au coin. Oh my God.
Oh, I was put in the corner one time.
Oh,
mais jamais, moi j'étais toujours dans le coin.
Ou dans le placard.
Parce que la biblique, c'était le placard.
Wow. OK. Et
So,
OK, pour l'interprétation, donc je vais
for
traduire la
interpretation,
question
I will
et
translate the
les
question
vont
and
répondre.
our
Parce que
speakers will
il y a toujours
answer.
l'interprétation. Si les
There's
questions
always
sont posées en
interpretation. If the
anglais,
questions are asked in
est-ce
English,
que l'interprétation va
I
continuer ou en
think the
français?
interpretation will
OK.
continue.
Donc, des questions,
Any
commentaires?
question, comments from Mr. Alfani, maybe?
Où on fait... Oui, c'est mieux, au fond, c'est mieux comme ça. OK. Tu le prends, puis... Oh, oui, oui. C'est parfait comme ça. Donc, monsieur...
Bonjour, je me prénomme Nyanui, originaire
My
de
name
Togo.
is, I'm from
Résident
Togo.
ici au Québec.
I reside in Quebec.
Origine.
I'm here with my
J'avais une
mother.
question sur,
I have a question.
merci pour la conférence.
Thank you for the
La question, c'est
conference.
sur
The question
l'étymologie
is
du mot
the etymology
hospitalité
of
par
the word
rapport à
hospitality
l'hôpital.
concerning in
Si vous
relationship
pouvez
with the
nous
hospital.
éclairer un peu.
Can
Merci
you
beaucoup.
clear us about this?
Une excellente question. D'ailleurs, il y a deux mots en langue
There are two words in French, which comes from the same place. It is the word hospitality and the word hostility. It goes together. The other is hostile as well. In fact, the hospital is where we offer hospitality for sick people. The prototype of the place where we offer hospitality was a monastery. The place where we receive the people that are migrating, pilgrims. We called it the hotel, the place where we receive sick people, hospital. Modernity changed the sense of those words, but it was a place where we offered an unconditional reception. That is what in the monasteries were parallel societies where we lived the kingdom of God in its most perfect form and as humanly imaginable. That's the same origin. It's a place of reception of those who needs help. If you have finished. I totally agree with the professor. There is hospitality, hospital, which comes from the point of receiving others. Monastery comes from a Greek word which means monos and means isolation. And generally, it was connected to the quarantine of the person isolated. And the word hospital or hospital comes more, I think, from this very biblical Christian approach, which was that the person will be with us more than to be isolated. In both cases, we want to take care of the person. The monastery comes from the word monos, which in Greek means mono, which means that he's alone. So it's very important. It's very important between the two mythology. One is biblical, which the professor explained well. The other one, which is more Greek, and that it requires an isolation of the person.
Monsieur Alfani, voulez ajouter quelque chose?
Monsieur Alfani?
No, je pense que
no, I think that this was well covered. Maybe you could add this obligation that the person that receives towards the one coming from abroad, from another outside of the country, is the aspect of the obligation that expects to receive this help, which is largely in three parts. The first, hospitality in the house, in Mali where I am. It's interesting, when you arrive, the stranger is well treated. The stranger is given the best that the community has. We receive him with a glass of water based on which everyone can drink. That's what I could add. Thank you.
Good morning, all. My name is Nadon Gunen. I reside in Montreal. I'm glad to be here this morning.
Bonjour, mon nom est Gunen, je réside à Montréal.
My question is specifically referring to Dr. Bellerose, and in your presentation, you cited the great story of Rahab, the role she played. Now, the question that I want to ask is, how do we balance immigration and national security in the light of the role that Rahab, she was hospitable, but at the same time, we saw what happened to Jericho at the same time. So bringing it into the present context, how do we balance immigration and national security? Thank you.
That's a question for a politician and not for a theologian. Probably more. Yeah,
as believer, we don't have in our consideration what can be put in question in national security. What we want to offer is charity or help to someone who asks for help, and no more than this. Of course, sometimes you can help someone who is not very who don't deserve that kind. It's not to me to judge this. We put that in the hands of God. It's generally the thought we have in religious thought. Also, for almost every religion, we have a time, a limited time for hospitality in the narratives of this religion, of these religions, and it is 3 days. So, if people are not worthy of this help, okay, they go ahead. You don't have to assume what they will do in your country after. When you have in mind the idea to offer not only hospitality, but to go over this hospitality and offer the possibility to make themselves feel at home at your home, now the problem of national security is there. And it is for me much more the excuse that that some people will use to reject migration, and a false argument. Of course, it can happen, but it's much more used to reject migration because of national security. They are not welcome here because they are Islamist, because they are. So every people who is Muslim will be associated with Islamism. Every people who is left-wing will be associated with communism and all the bad things they do everywhere in the world. No, we cannot prejudge people like that as believer. So, of course, now you have the role of the state, and I don't see religion that can play the role of the state, but it's something else that we can offer, something that the state cannot. So, and I just take advantage of this question to bring something else important in that way. Just like Mr. Sari, he is a good example of a person who is believer. He is involved in the public sphere, but I'm pretty sure of this, he don't want to change Quebec, Canadian, or City of Montreal as a Muslim state, but his beliefs as Muslim are present in his way to understand his politics. And that's the kind of influence in our days we can have as religious people in the state. So it's not to move out the state to put the religion thought there, but there's a complement there between with both instances. Thank you. Question.
Revenir ici. Hein? Venez ici. Faut venir ici. Voilà.
Merci pour la
Thank you
conférence.
for this
Ma question
conference.
s'adresse
My question is addressed.
le nom là, moi je l'ai oublié déjà.
I forgot the name already.
Ah, d'accord.
Mr. Bellerose.
Et moi, il y a quelque chose qui ne tourne
There
pas
is
bien dans ma
something
tête,
which
c'est que
doesn't go well in my head.
le mot
The
immigrant
word
et résident
immigrant
là,
and a
Je ne
resident.
comprends pas bien.
I do not
Parce que
understand well
je crois
because
que le monde
I think that the
tourne.
world is
Et
turning,
aujourd'hui, je peux être
and
résident,
today
demain,
I
je
may
peux
be a
être
resident,
appelé immigrant.
and tomorrow I can be
Donc,
called an
moi, je ne
immigrant.
vois pas que le problème se
Je do
pose.
not
Mais
understand
tous si
that
nous
the
sommes ici, je crois
question,
que
I don't understand
nos
how this
aïeux sont venus
problem
de
is being
quelque
asked.
part
But all of us,
pour
our
venir
ancestors came
quelque
from
part.
somewhere to come
Et c'est
somewhere.
les
And
calamités, c'est
the
les guerres
calamities,
qui font
wars,
que les gens
which
se déplacent.
makes it such that the
Et
people
à la
move
base de tout
around.
ça,
And
là,
at
il
the
y a le
base of all this,
mensonge et puis
there is
il
a
y a les
lie
secrets.
in the
C'est quand
secret.
l'homme découvre
It's
les
when the
secrets
man
ou bien les
discovers the
mensonges,
secret or the
bon,
lies,
et les gens se révoltent.
and the people
Et
will
les
be
gens se déplacent.
revolted, and the
Donc,
people
si moi je peux être résident
will
aujourd'hui, demain,
move,
immigrant,
emigrate.
pourquoi
I can be a
pas
resident one day, immigrant,
nous
and
accepter
next
les uns
day.
les autres
Why not
tels que
accept
nous
one
sommes,
another as
au
we
lieu de
are,
dire que celui-là il est
instead of
immigrant,
saying this
il
one
a
is an
telle
immigrant and
condition,
that he has certain
autre.
condition and the
Et
other one is.
ensuite, quand vous êtes
And
immigrant, vous
then
venez
when you
quelque
are
part, vous
immigrant,
avez vos faiblesses
you
et vos forces, ou
come
bien vos valeurs
elsewhere. You have
qui, en
your
premier temps,
force,
sont
strengths,
cachées.
your weakness, which at
Et
first are
dès que
hidden.
vous vous
And
habituez
as
au
soon
milieu,
as you become
vos
used
valeurs
to
sortent.
the environment, your
Et quand vos
values
valeurs
will
sortent,
appear. And
maintenant,
when
ça
your
devient
values come out, it
la
becomes
rivalité
a
et ça
rivalry
pose des problèmes.
and it
Bon,
poses
vraiment,
questions.
je m'embrouille dans toute cette situation-là.
I'm getting stuck in all this situation. Thank you.
Je partage cette
I
réflexion-là.
share
Moi,
this
d'abord, une chose que j'ai
reflection. The
pas
first
dit,
thing,
j'aurais
and one
dû
thing I didn't
faire,
say,
comme a
but I
fait
should
M.
have done,
Sari, deux
as
fois de
Mr.
suite en
Shadi said,
exemple. C'est rare qu'on fait
to
ça aux
his.
politiciens deux fois en exemple. Généralement,
So it's
dans une
rare
même
that I
journée.
cite twice a politician as an
C'est
example on
parler
my
un petit
day.
peu du background,
It's to
parce
speak
que
a bit of the
ça nous
background
influence
because
évidemment. J'ai moi-même
it
été
influences.
immigrant,
I was
immigrant,
immigrant. It was immigrant,
tout ça.
immigrant.
Pendant 10 ans en Colombie, je
For
suis
10
marié
years in
colombien, une
Colombia, I married a
afro-colombienne.
Colombian,
Donc, ça repose
Afro-Colombian.
toujours la
So it
question de
poses
l'immigration toujours
a
présente.
question of
Il y a
immigration, which
toujours
is always
quelqu'un qui
present.
sera pas
There's always
considéré
someone which will
comme
not be
chez lui, peu
considered
importe
as
où on est.
being at home, wherever you live.
D'une part. Donc,
So in
et
one
là,
way,
je pense ce que
and
vous soulevez comme
here, what
question,
you
ça a
are
beaucoup à voir
questioning
avec la
here
question
has
de
a lot to do
l'intégration
with the question of
que
integration.
je trouve difficile
I find
comme
difficult
concept
to, as a
et,
concept,
et un peu un faux débat, la
and
question
a little bit like
de
a false
l'intégration.
debate, the question of
Que je pense,
integration, which I think,
comment dire,
how can I say,
truqué un peu.
which is
Parce
a
qu'on
bit
s'intègre à quoi?
tricked. Because what are we integrated to?
S'intégrer, par exemple,
Integrating
au Québec,
to?
est-ce que c'est
To
s'intégrer à
integrate
tous
to
les mauvais
Quebec,
traits
is
que la
it to
culture
integrate to
québécoise
all the
comporte?
bad
Ben, c'est pas ce qu'on
aspects
souhaite.
of
Certains
Quebec
vont dire ça.
culture implies?
On
That's not what
espère
we
que quelqu'un qui
wish.
arrive
We
va
hope
nous
that
aider à
someone
nous en
will come here,
sortir.
will help us to become
Est-ce que
better.
s'intégrer, c'est
Does integrating
nécessairement transformer
necessarily
positivement l'autre? Est-ce qu'on n'est pas en train de
meaning
donner une
transforming
tâche à
positively
l'immigrant
the
qu'il n'a
other? Are
pas à
we
avoir
not trying
en
to
étant
give a
le
task to the
modèle à
immigrant which
suivre?
he
Ça aussi,
shouldn't
c'est
have to
problématique.
become the model to
L'intégration
follow?
porte toujours le
Integration
binôme
always
majorité-minorité. On
has the
s'intègre à ce
majority
qu'on
minority
considère quelque chose qui
concept.
est en
We
place et qui est
integrate into
majoritaire.
something which is a
D'autant plus
majority,
qu'au Québec, au Canada, Montréal, on
especially
ne sait
that
pas
in
vraiment de
Quebec,
quoi il
Canada, and
s'agit quand on
Montreal,
parle
we
de
don't know
majorité.
what we talk about when we talk about
Au Québec, on
majority.
dira, ben,
In
intégrez-vous aux
Quebec say, well,
francophones. Au Canada, ben, aux
integrate with
anglophones.
francophones and English
Quelqu'un
to
qui reste à
anglophones.
Ville-Saint-Laurent,
And
mais c'est
someone
qui
just
trop,
in
là,
Ville
c'est
Saint
quoi une
Laurent doesn't
majorité
know too much was
monstrueuse?
the majority,
C'est par
which
rapport
we
à quoi?
find ourselves it's in relationship to what?
Donc, puis moi, je reste,
And
j'habite
I live
tout juste aux abords du petit Maghreb.
at
Qu'est-ce que ce serait
the
d'intégrer à la
close to the
société
small
où
Maghreb.
j'habite?
What would it be
Bon.
to
On
integrate
va
to the
plutôt
society in
remplacer
which
ce
I
terme-là
live? We will replace this
théologique
term from a
par
theological point of view by
c'est-à-dire
interhospitality.
qu'on est, et c'est ça la notion de
That's the
réciprocité dont je
notion
parlais
of
tout à l'heure, c'est qu'on
reciprocity
est
of which
toujours
I
dans un
talk, is
processus
that we're
d'accueil
always in a
mutuel.
process of mutual
Je peux être né ici, vous
hospitality.
êtes
You
quand
may
même en
be
train de m'accueillir
born here, but
à
you're still
l'endroit où je me trouve.
receiving
Par
me at the
exemple,
place
si vous
where
venez
I
du petit
stay.
Maghreb,
For example, they live in a small Maghreb, there's a culture that is very real. You can't say they're not at home. It's another culture that dominates. It remains that in the practice and facts, that's not what happened. I could say that I would like to normally with a coffee with my wife. That's not what it happens in the small Maghreb. I'm also received in this way. I would like, for example, to practice my Christian faith, Protestant faith in French, at home, in my language. But to do that, I have to go in a Cameroon community because there are no French Canadian Protestants in Quebec. It's marvelous because it completely turns upside down the paradigm of hospitality, of integration, and it shows in the dynamics of interhospitality. Nobody is more really at home than another. I cannot tell myself more Quebecois than whomever else in this room because I was born here. I belong to a French Canadian culture, certainly. The fact of being born in this language to dominate and to have the French Canadian cultural codes are such that I'm more of a member of this community than another, but there's nothing that does that to be part of. No, some people will integrate in this community that has this French Canadian characteristics as a Haitian immigrant, but I'm not more Quebecer or more Canadian. We can take this as state identities. So this dichotomy of resident versus immigrant only exists in the measure of the paradigm minority majority. When we're in the dynamics of interhospitality instead of integrate two, it changes. We are necessarily differences that have to live together, but we form together a plurality, which has uniformized, which is uniform, not necessarily uniformizing, but living together. Reciprocity is important. So someone who is being received by also needs to accept the way the other receives him with his own way of understanding integration. In Quebec, we have some ways that are very particular to integrate and to receive, and for some, it's not a good way to receive. Someone comes to our house, the fridge is full, and you can serve yourself if you need. But in the culture of my wife, this is never done. That was if we abandoned our guests, if we did that. But me, I find it comfortable if my friend says, someone tells me if you need something, ask me. I don't feel well received because they want to serve me, so I will don't feel comfortable. So the way to understand hospitality is influenced by our culture. That's what's being the problem here. The way to understand the reception of the other. So we have to come out of the paradigm majority minority. We do not want to integrate someone coming out of a minority into something which we call a majority. We will never get out of this. We will always be excluding people this way. Thank you for this reflection. I thought that was very good, very pertinent. Thank you so much. Any other reaction?
Au niveau des conférenciers, non?
Si je peux juste dire un mot à caractère.
If I can say something about the bureaucratic problematic, when we talk about integration, we have to think how the United Nations agency, UNHCR in particular, understands the word integration. And we speak of refugees when they're accepted after submitted their request to be a refugee. They have to be integrated in society. That means to follow rules and regulations, bureaucratic rules and regulations of this state, and that where they will become a citizen of. So it's a process how to become accepted of a citizen within that state, in that space which has become theirs. Really liked your question, your intervention, because it brings me to reflect of the question of vocabulary. In many conflicting situations, societal situations, is generally a problem of vocabulary. We really don't understand one another. It's something that doesn't work well in my head. So it's not, is that the vocabulary that I've used, that someone used, does not correspond to the way it is received, how the message is received, and especially imagining a new immigrant. A new immigrant will find terms that in his culture, it's important because I teach in university, but I teach management. And one of the books really influenced me in my way to see things. It was a Japanese word, Donanakai Akuchi, lorsqu'ils ont parlé de when they spoke about integration in a general way, they used terms, very interesting terms such as socialization, interiorization. To interiorization, they're very careful, and the book is based on religious beliefs, actually. She and Ba, those are very religious concepts. But when we talk about interiorization, they're careful about the vocabulary they use, how it will be received by the individual and the group. I appreciated the administrative aspect that you brought up, because those are terms that we use, and the term that we will use, because there's a consensus of an administration of our government, which is in place, which doesn't recognize reality. The problematic in Canadian immigration, and I'll say it often, is that it is in the federal and provincial level. It's a very grave problematic when we sit down with a minister of immigration, and we see that with his good faith, his will, his goodwill, he does not understand the situation on the local situation, or worse even, it was influenced by a case or a single case of a request for a work permit, a reality which is different in Ontario, Alberta, Quebec, Montreal. Montreal is completely different, but we try to apply the same rules to everybody. I think that it's very pretentious from any government that could be in place. And concerning security, I really liked your question. And there are two aspects. I am a spokesperson in the question of public security in the city of Montreal with the official opposition. When I take position on any subject, you said very well, Dr. Bellerose, our culture, our religion, our lived experience influences us in our decision-making. Someone who says different doesn't understand himself. He really has to question himself. The two aspects I speak about is public security or security of the person which I receive. There has to be security after to protect. I'm not afraid of him. I'm afraid for him. I'll give you an example, very simple. In Montreal-Nord, in my borough, the recruitment of young people, immigrant young people that just arrived, is much more simple than the recruitment of someone that's born here. And let's say that both are from Togo. You understand? There is a certain stigmatization of the other, a fragility of the other, where the person who has I didn't understand that one. So you will understand this, but this group is more easy and you'll be able to recruit them. Think about young from the Maghreb, from Asia, Togolese or Congolese. Is very important. So I have to protect. I have to protect his father, his mother. When we say it, when we talk about security, we talk about him. We talk about this young Haitian arriving with his hair and his posture, and that's a problem. We're afraid of him. You said quickly, yeah, there's something in my mind that I'm afraid of this young boy from the Maghreb with his way that he stands and his hair. There is a bias that the police will do a certain profiling, that society will see him and create a profile, will profile him in such a way. Me as a politician, how do I confront this? That's my role. My role first, and a very simple example. I was just called today on the question of the Palestinian question. Their camps. When you talk to me about the camps, protest camps, the campments, my first position, I'm from a Moroccan origin. From a Muslim, I'm pro-Palestinian, but the first thing you're going to ask me, what is my role in the city? First is that the city be safe. It's difficult whether you like it or not. The first thing we have to be concerned that's where there's some programs of integration must happen. There is a sensitization of the public which is very weak, and policy, it must be balanced. For the time, it's not balanced. The community, I hate this concept of community. As soon as there's a Haitian community, a Togolese community, a Moroccan community, I'm starting to subtract them to the Quebec, Montreal community. I'm saying they're different. When I say from the Moroccan community, no, I'm Montrealer with American origin, with a Muslim confession. You can't subtract me. It's in the vocabulary. It's in the vocabulary that we have to be very careful, first and foremost. Oh, I think we could continue for a long time, but we will, okay, one last question. After that, we're going to go and continue. We have an hour in front of us. We're going to go and eat together. I want a last word to our president, Mr. Famularo, which I did not introduce to you. The last question. Do you want to come in the middle?
Bonjour tout le monde.
Hello.
J'aimerais vous féliciter pour cette conférence. Je suis très heureuse d'avoir participé. Merci beaucoup pour
Hello everyone. I'm very happy that I could participate. My name is Sama. I'm a Muslim confession. I'd like to make a comment on the fact that we do not have a monastery or convent in the Catholic sense where it would be dedicated simply to God or to religion. In our religion, every person is responsible. So hospitality, receiving the other, all those in our religion is pushing us to do. I really liked the intervention of Mr. Sari when he alluded to hospitality and how we treat the neighbors and all of this. It's a responsibility for us as individual with society to receive the other, because we don't have that it's only the mosque who will do it. Mosque. That's the first point I wanted to make. Second point is that I always have the impression that we consider the immigrant as a heavy load for society. I think if we could understand better what is the experience of this immigrant, we could help him better and make society benefit from it. I'll give you an example, very brief, which struck me. A sister from Afghanistan told me about her brother who came recently, who took French course, and afterwards he could integrate to the workforce. And asked her, what will he do as a work? And she told me maybe security agent or taxi driver. I asked her, what is his training? And she tells me he's a musician. And I find that it's very sad that we cannot benefit fully of the talents of the persons who are immigrants. The United Nations and humanity was
Je ne
mentioned.
cache pas que je suis très déçue par
I
ce
can hand you
concept
that I'm very
d'humanité
sad,
dans les pays
disappointed, but this
occidentaux.
concept of
On est venu avec
humanity in
cette idée que tout le
Western
monde
countries,
était
we came to
égal,
this country that
on avait
everybody's equal,
droit
that we have
comme
right
les droits
as
accordés à tout
like
le monde.
all the rights
Et là, je
given to
m'aperçois
everybody. And
que
now I
non,
realize
c'est
that
des droits
no,
quand les
those
personnes
are
sont
rights when
blanches,
when a person are
occidentales,
white,
mais une fois, par
Western,
exemple, qu'on
but
regarde
once
les autres
when you look
personnes,
at other
les autres
people,
peuples, c'est
of other
différent, on
people,
n'a
it
plus les
is
droits.
different.
Je
We
crois
don't have
que
the
je
same
vais
right.
pas nommer le cas de
I
la
don't want to
Palestine qui est
name
vraiment,
Palestine, which is
c'était
truly,
un choc pour moi,
it was a
une
shock for
déception
me, a
indescriptible
deception,
de voir
indescribable,
comment les choses se
amazing
passent
description how the
et
things
comment
are
ça
happening
et c'est traité à un
and
niveau
how
politique.
it's treated in a
Finalement,
political
quand on
level.
parle de
Finally,
politique
when you
d'immigration au
speak of
niveau
a policy of
fédéral,
immigration in the
je vous
federal
dirais, don't get me
government,
started. Parce que là-dessus, je trouve que
on this subject,
vraiment,
I find
on a
that
besoin d'une grande
we
réforme.
need a
Merci
great
beaucoup.
reform. Thank you very much.
Avant de donner la parole à Monsieur Famularo,
Now we'll give
Mr.
Mr. Famularo, Mr. Alfani, maybe one last word before we continue our discussion together.
Non, je suis tout à fait d'accord avec Madame tout à l'heure. Je pense qu'il est important de ne pas généraliser certains aspects.
I think, I think we shouldn't generalize certain concepts regarding immigrants. It's important to humanize and encourage solidarity, human solidarity, instead of a solidarity that is which is made in a discriminatory way. That's what I'd like to add. Thank you.
Alors, merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Je vais parler en italien, c'est correct?
If you don't mind, I'll speak in Italian.
Peut-être tout le monde va
Maybe
me comprendre.
everybody will understand me.
Mais comme
As my family has been here for 70 years.
Mon arrière-grand-père est
My
venu
great-grandfather came in 1923 for 1
à
year
la Chine.
in La
Il
Chine,
est
and
retourné en
he
Italie,
went back to
comme les gens
Italy
faisaient dans ce
as the
travail,
people were
travaillait
doing at the
pendant quelque temps,
time.
puis il
He was
retournait.
working for some time and then
De temps
returning.
en temps, les
But when
histoires
I
des
hear the
immigrants
stories
ici au
of
Québec
immigrants here in Quebec
et au Canada,
and in Canada,
je veux vous informer que
I want to inform
nous,
you
les anciens
that
immigrants,
we,
nous
the
sommes
old
passés à
immigrants,
travers
we went
des
through
défis
the
comme vous
challenges
avant
as
nous.
you before you.
Et dans ce temps-là,
In
on
that
n'était pas,
time, we were
la
not,
société n'était pas
the
tellement
society was
sensibilisée
not sensitized
à la
to
tolérance, à les
tolerance,
beaux mots, à
to
la
nice
façon d'agir
words,
d'une
to the
façon
ways to
respectueuse.
act in a
Pas
respectful
comme ça dans
respect,
les années
in a way of
60, 50,
respecting the
70
other.
même.
It was not like that in the 60s
Nous
and 70s.
avons
We
vécu une
lived
évolution
an
dans notre
evolution
société.
in our society,
Et l'idée
and
que
the
moi je
idea
suis blanc,
that I am
je ne
white,
suis pas aussi blanc que
I'm not as white
Rosanna, qui
as
est aussi
Rosanna,
italienne,
which
moi je
is
suis
also Italian,
de
because
couleur un peu plus
I'm
foncée,
a little
hein,
bit
parce que
darker,
mes gens
because
sont
my
du sud de
ancestors are
l'Italie.
from the
Il y a
south
plus
of
de soleil
Italy.
là-bas.
There's more sun
Mais on
there,
n'était jamais
but we were
acceptés
never
parce que
accepted
les
because
francophones, les
the
anglophones
francophones,
étaient
anglophones,
l'ethnicité
the ethnicity was a majority
Mais
ethnicity. But
on a construit, on a
we
développé
built,
notre
we
vie,
developed our
et
lives,
aujourd'hui on
and
voit
today we
que
see
il y a un dire à Toronto que les Italiens
some
ont
people say in
construit
Italy that the
Toronto,
Italians
hein,
built Toronto,
la première génération qui
the
sont
first
venus.
generation
Et
that
là,
came,
les
and
Italiens,
now Italians, the third and fourth
sont les
generation
propriétaires de
are the
Toronto.
owners of Toronto. Isn't
C'est
that
vrai?
so? Isn't that true?
Et c'est quelque chose
It's
que
something that
on doit avoir
we
patience.
must be patient with.
On doit avoir le
We
courage
we
de
must
pas
have
se
the courage
plaindre de toutes les
not
choses parce que,
to
tu sais,
complain of everything because everybody's a human. If I go to Japan, where my wife, they will look at me like I'm from another planet. If I would go in Africa, maybe Africans would look at me, someone from another planet. If I go to Iraq and Iran and Saudi Arabia, I don't think I would have more rights from the other. We know very well. But Canada is special. Canada is special because we are a country of immigrants. We're truly a country of immigrants. Indigenous people have been here for 10, 15, 20,000 years. Europeans have been here maybe 500 years ago. We build a beautiful society where we have opportunity and we are capable to receive immigrants from around the world, from everywhere. And we know that there are many that they come here and they receive a place to live, food. They receive a little bit of money to survive. Which country does that? Not many countries are able to do that. I believe it's because of the roots of our society, which was built based on certain values of generosity, the values of that we believe in to serve and to love for the benefit of others. And I think that we as immigrants, we can evolve and we can continue to build a beautiful country here in Montreal, in Quebec, in Canada, in order for the future refugees and the future people who need can share as well in this space with us. That's, here you go. We are Jews, Christians, Muslims, we are of all religions. But more and more people don't believe in anything, or they don't believe in traditional religions anyway. Maybe they will believe in certain fundamental values, which are these values of living for the sake of others. With this, thank you this morning, especially Isabel, to have organized everything, for the participation of our speakers. It was at the highest level. I saw that. Should I stop? I expect that there's another more 3 hours, but to speak, but I will speak. I will stop soon. And I saw that the Augustinian training of Mr. Bellerose was being shared, and I saw some elements of this training, and I'm very proud that we receive such a diverse group of all races and nationalities, white, yellow, red, black, and all countries, English speaking, French speaking.
So I'll conclude by saying thank you in English and mille grazie. Thank you.
Donc,
Alors,
merci, Alfani.
merci. Thank you, Mr. Alfani. Grazie mille.
On se retrouve en banque.
We will find each other downstairs. You can go down by left, by right, and you will follow people by going to. Oops.
Ok, donc après la photo, vous descendez.
After the photo, let's go down.
Vous prendrez un vous allez vous
Self-service.
asseoir dans la salle à manger. Donc, avant ça, une photo.